Before today's episode, a quick message. This is Mark, and I'm the creator of Lantern Podcasts. I'm really looking to talk with more of our listeners to get a sense of what you honestly like and dislike about these shows. So if you'd like to chat, please shoot me an email at hello@lanternpodcasts.com, and I'd love to speak with each and every one of you. Thanks. Now on today's episode.
AP now has a sourced number here. Dozens of Hondius passengers walked off that ship without a single contact tracing step. And today, we've got the WHO disease outbreak notice and the ECDC threat assessment side by side, so we can finally say what that means.
This is Hantavirus Watch. I'm Brian with Cassidy, and today we finally stop asking whether the tracing gap was real and start reading the receipts.
We've got 4 documents in front of us: the AP report, the WHO DON, the ECDC brief dated May 6th, and Madeleine Barron's ASM piece on Andy's person-to-person transmission. Let's line them up without flattening them into one thing.
And if you were on a connecting itinerary out of any port the Hondius touched, stay with us, because dozens untraced means the geography is bigger than one ship.
Here's World Health Organization. The WHO Disease Outbreak Notice, DON 600, is out now. And that's the formal document we've been waiting on all week. Andy's Hantavirus, multi-country cruise ship linked. That's the WHO's framing, not ours.
And it lands the same week AP reports that dozens of passengers left that ship without contact tracing. Not a small number of high-risk contacts not yet located. Dozens off the ship, no trace. Those are very different sentences.
Just to be precise about the sourcing, not located was WHO's earlier language, and that's a status report. AP's left without contact tracing is procedural. It tells you where the chain broke, not just that a gap exists. The ECDC threat assessment is dated May 6th. The DON is current. 3 weeks of institutional distance, and the question is whether the case count and risk framing changed in that window.
Meanwhile, Madeleine Barron's ASM piece on person-to-person Andy's transmission published May 21st. So ECDC was doing its May 6th risk math before that science was in a named, peer-reviewed outlet. Does the WHO DON reflect the updated biology or not?
European Center for Disease Prevention and Control writes,
as of 6 May 2026, 7 cases have been reported in a Hantavirus-associated cluster of illness on a cruise ship, including 3 deaths, 1 critically ill, 2 symptomatic, and 1 with unknown status. ECDC was notified on 2 May 2026 by the Netherlands via the European Union, EU, Early Warning and Response System, EWRS, about a cluster of unknown disease with severe respiratory symptoms on a cruise ship in the South Atlantic, operating under a Dutch flag.
The ECDC threat assessment is dated May 6th, so when it was published, the count was 7 cases. 3 deaths, 1 critically ill, 2 symptomatic, 1 status unknown, on a Dutch-flagged vessel with 149 people aboard from 23 nationalities. That's the baseline document. The WHO disease outbreak notice sitting next to it now is the more current read. And the question is whether the numbers moved in the 3 weeks between those 2 publications.
9 EU and EEA member states were represented on that ship. Belgium, France, Germany, Greece, Ireland, the Netherlands, Poland, Portugal, Spain. Those passengers went home into 9 different public health systems. The ECDC document is from May 6. AP is now reporting dozens left without contact tracing. So which of those 9 countries actually got a complete passenger list, and which ones got whatever turned up?
The Netherlands notified ECDC through the EU Early Warning and Response System on May 2nd, 4 days before this brief was published. That notification pathway is documented and sourced. What we don't know from this document alone is whether the EWRS alert triggered parallel contact tracing obligations in each of the other 8 member states, or whether that was left to bilateral follow-up.
And that bilateral follow-up is exactly the crack AP found. If Spain's cohort is the one with a named list monitoring structure, and a second confirmed asymptomatic case, Spain apparently did the follow-up. The question is, who didn't? And the ECDC brief from May 6 can't answer that because it predates the passenger dispersal problem by weeks.
Here's the Associated Press.
A top epidemic expert at the UN Health Agency said Wednesday that the Hantavirus outbreak is not the next COVID pandemic. The vessel at the center of a deadly outbreak remained off Cape Verde with nearly 150 people on board waiting to head to Spain's Canary Islands.
AP is now reporting specifically that dozens of passengers left the ship without contact tracing. And that wording matters. WHO's earlier language was not located. AP's framing is left without tracing. Those are different claims. One is a search status, the other is a procedural failure with a named moment.
All week I've been asking whether the gap was real or whether I was being too skeptical of the model response framing. AP just handed me the answer. Dozens, sourced, gone. Which ports did they disembark at? Because if you were on a connecting itinerary out of any of those stops, you may be in that untraced group and have no idea.
And this lands directly on the statutory question we flagged earlier in the week. Andes isn't on the presidential executive order list, so the legal authority to hold anyone was already thin. AP's story isn't just an operational footnote. It's what that legal gap looks like in practice.
The cohorts that do have named lists, Spain's monitored group, the single facility structures, those are the exception now. The AP story makes that clear. Most passengers weren't in a named list system. They were in an "we'll find you eventually" system, and for dozens apparently, eventually never came.
From Madeline Barron at American Society for Microbiology.
The cause of his death, while initially unclear, was determined to be Andes Hantavirus, ANDV, which he picked up prior to boarding the ship. His wife, sickened by the same virus, later died as well. As of this writing, there have been 10 reported cases of ANDV infection from the ship, resulting in 3 deaths.
The ASM piece by Madeline Barron, published May 21st, gives us the clearest scientific anchor we've had all week. 10 reported cases tied to the MV Hondius, 3 deaths, index patient exposed before he ever boarded, and Andes Hantavirus confirmed as the cause. Not suspected, confirmed.
And the wife, she got it from him, not from a rodent in Ushuaia. That's the person-to-person chain documented in a named, peer-reviewed outlet now, not just something officials were monitoring.
Right, and that matters because the ECDC threat assessment was dated May 6th, 3 weeks ago, and it was working with earlier science. Barron's piece drops May 21st, after the WHO Dawn is published. So for the first time, we can triangulate. ASM on the mechanism, ECDC on the risk framing, WHO Dawn on the formal case count, and see whether they're telling the same story.
The part I want answered from that ASM piece is the exposure threshold, because cabin neighbors and crew are a different contact tier than a spouse. And if the transmission biology has sharpened since May 6, the ECDC's early risk math may already be stale.
If you follow Hantavirus Watch for practical health alerts, you might also like Food Recall Watch. Daily FDA and USDA food recalls, allergy alerts, outbreak-linked notices, retailer polls, and pet food advisories. Find it wherever you listen to podcasts. We've put links to all of today's stories in the show notes, so if there's a report or update you want to look at more closely, you can find it there. That's Hantavirus Watch for this Friday, May 29th. This is a Lantern podcast.